In the forgotten town of Raven Hollow, Pennsylvania, the nights arrive faster than they should. The trees stand taller here, older too, their roots curling beneath cracked streets that haven't felt new tires in decades. On the hill, overlooking what's left of Main Street, sits Blackridge Asylum, a building so large, seems to hold its breath against the horizon. Locals don't drive that way anymore. They say the road curves in strange ways near the gate, like it's trying to lead you somewhere else. And if you do stop, even for a second, you might hear the hum of old electricity still crawling through dead wires. They shut Blackridge down in 1979, after something happened during a winter storm. The official reports spoke of a power failure, but in Raven Hollow, no one believed that story, because everyone knew the asylum wasn't empty when it burned. The man who returned there first was named Eli Mercer, a freelance journalist from Pittsburgh. He wasn't looking for ghosts, not at first. He was chasing the truth behind a rumor that 3 years after Blackridge closed, someone had been living inside. The locals called him the warden. No one knew his name, but some said he was a former orderly who refused to leave when the asylum shut down. Others said he wasn't human at all. Eli didn't believe in hauntings, but the story paid well and he needed the money. So, one cold November morning, he packed a recorder, flashlight, and a borrowed 8mm camera and drove the 2 hours to Raven Hollow. When he arrived, the town looked like it had been caught between seasons, fall colors bleeding into the dead gray of winter. A diner, a church, a handful of boarded-up homes. The only sign of life came from Maggie's general store, where an old woman stood behind the counter, watching him too closely. "You here for the asylum?" she asked before he could even speak. Her voice was gravel and smoke. Eli blinked, caught off guard. "I'm writing about it." "Yeah." "Heard it's cursed?" She finished for him. "Yeah, that's one word for it." She leaned in, lowering her tone. "If you go up there, don't stay past dark. They don't like strangers after sundown." He laughed politely, thinking it was small-town folklore, but the way her eyes stayed on him, flat, unblinking, made him wonder if she was serious. The drive up to Blackridge took 15 minutes. The road narrowed, trees pressing in from both sides, and fog rolled across the windshield like breath on glass. The gates were still there, rusted, half collapsed, with the word Blackridge barely legible above the arch. Eli stopped the car, set up his recorder, and began narrating. His voice echoed slightly in the cold air. "This is Eli Mercer," he said into the microphone, "documenting the remains of Blackridge Asylum. Closed since 1979. Locals report strange activity, lights in the windows, voices in the hallways. I'll be entering to investigate." The gate groaned as he pushed it open. The sound lingered, too long to be natural. Inside, the asylum loomed 4 stories tall, its windows hollow and black. Ivy climbed the stone walls like veins. A single door hung loose from its hinges, creaking in rhythm with the wind. The interior smelled of mold and rust. His flashlight beam caught old wheelchairs, torn mattresses, and a long corridor lined with peeling paint. He started filming, describing everything aloud, but the camera's audio began to hiss. Even though he'd checked it twice before leaving, he moved room by room. The deeper he went, the colder it became, and somewhere, faintly, he thought he heard the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, matching his own pace. When he stopped, the sound stopped too. "Probably echo," he whispered, though his throat had gone dry. He reached the main ward, a vast hall filled with rows of iron-framed beds, and on one of them, beneath a torn blanket, lay something small. He pulled it back, expecting debris. It was a doll, porcelain, cracked. "One I'm missing," the tag around its neck read, "Property of room 212. Eli checked the hallway numbers until he found 212. The door was locked from the outside, heavy, reinforced. He forced it open with a metal pipe and stepped inside. The room was small. Bed, desk, rusted sink. But the walls, they were covered in writing. Dozens of sentences, carved over and over again into the plaster. They never left. He watches through the mirrors. Don't follow the light. Then, beneath them, a single line written in something darker than ink. The warden comes when the storm returns. He glanced out the window. Clouds were gathering. Distant thunder. The storm hit an hour later. Rain hammered the roof. Wind moaned through the broken windows. And somewhere, deep within the building, a light flickered. Eli followed it through the hall, his flashlight trembling in his hand. It led him down into the basement, the old treatment wing. The deeper he went, the more the air smelled of burned metal. The power was supposed to be long dead, but the light kept pulsing like a heartbeat. He reached a locked metal door at the end of the hall. On it hung a plaque that read, "Warden's Quarters." He lifted his camera, pressed record, and spoke quietly. November 12th, 3:04 a.m. I'm at the door labeled Warden's Quarters. Light is visible under the frame. Proceeding to enter. T turned the handle. It opened on its own. Inside, everything looked untouched, as if someone had just stepped out moments before. A lantern burned on a desk. Papers were scattered across the floor. And in the corner, an old uniform hung neatly on a hook. Then the camera flickered. A shadow crossed the lens, human-shaped, but wrong. Too tall, shoulders bending in impossible angles. Eli froze. The figure stood behind the desk, its head tilted slightly, as if studying him. "Who's there?" He managed to whisper. The thing stepped forward, slow, deliberate, and with each step, the lantern dimmed until only its outline remained. A face half covered by a cracked leather mask, and beneath the mask, a mouth that didn't move when it spoke. "You shouldn't have come back." The voice wasn't loud, but it was everywhere, in the walls, the floor, inside his own chest. The last thing the camera captured was Eli's flashlight hitting the ground, the beam spinning wildly before everything went black. Weeks later, police found his car by the gates. The engine was still warm, but Eli was gone. The camera was recovered, the tape damaged, half melted. Only fragments survived, but among them was one final frame. The doll from room 212, sitting upright, both eyes now intact. And as the night settles, the voices fade back into silence, waiting for the next soul curious enough to listen. The halls of Blackridge grow quiet again, but not for long, because the shadows never sleep. They wait for those who dare to return, and when you do, they'll be here with another story to tell. Second city, named Ashburn, Massachusetts, sits at the edge of the Atlantic like a forgotten secret. Its cobblestone streets slope toward the harbor, and the air smells permanently of salt and old wood. Locals will tell you it's a quiet town, but the silence hides a history that refuses to stay buried. On the edge of the harbor stands the Ashburn Coastal Hospital, abandoned for nearly 50 years, its windows shattered and doors warped by storms. Built in the late 1800s to treat seafarers suffering from unknown illnesses, it became infamous for its sudden closures, strange patient disappearances, and unexplainable deaths. No one remembers the exact moment the hospital became haunted. Perhaps it was the day a shipwreck washed ashore hundreds of miles from its course. Or maybe it was the night a fire consumed the east wing and left charred skeletons no one could identify. Survivors whispered of shadows moving beneath flickering gas lamps, of voices calling names no longer alive. And now, in 2025, the place still waits for the curious, the brave, and the foolish. The first to arrive that night was Clara Evans, a freelance photographer who specialized in abandoned places. She had seen Ashburn from the coast a month ago during a storm, its silhouette rising from the mist like a shipwreck stranded on land. Now, camera slung across her shoulder, she walked along the cracked dock, her boots splashing in shallow puddles. The harbor was quiet, but the silence wasn't comforting. it was deliberate, like the town itself was holding its breath. She pushed open the hospital's main gate, and it groaned like an old man in pain. The smell hit her first: rotting wood, rust, and something faintly metallic, like dried blood. The building's brick facade was mottled with black stains, and the words Ashburn Coastal Hospital were barely legible above the entrance, half-erased by time and salt air. Inside, the hospital was a labyrinth of corridors, some flooded with the tide from storm-damaged pipes. Clara's flashlight revealed peeling wallpaper, rusted wheelchairs, and floors littered with patient records, yellowed and brittle. Every room had a story, and every story whispered from the shadows. The first ward she entered was the seafarer's wing, reserved for sailors who returned from long voyages with mysterious ailments, fevers, hallucinations, and sudden bouts of madness. Clara lifted a file from the floor and began to read. Names, dates, symptoms, each more bizarre than the last. One patient, Samuel Hargrove, listed his condition simply as followed by voices in the fog. Another, Elias Carter, noted that he could see shapes in the water that weren't there. Both had vanished without a trace. As she moved deeper into the hospital, Clara felt the temperature drop. Her breath became visible, swirling in the faint beam of her flashlight. Then came the sound, faint at first, almost drowned out by the storm outside, a slow tapping like fingernails rapping on metal. It moved down the hall behind her. She spun, flashlight slicing through the darkness. The corridor was empty. She whispered into her recorder, trying to maintain calm. This is Clara Evans, documenting Ashburn Coastal Hospital, midnight, November 15th. There is an unexplained sound behind me. The tapping stopped. Then, a low, echoing hum began, like the vibration of a ship's engine underwater. Clara's pulse quickened. She followed the sound to a stairwell leading to the sub-basement, long sealed after a collapse in the 1950s. The door to the stairs was warped and nearly stuck, but she forced it open. The sub-basement was a tangle of broken furniture, pipes, and what looked like old hospital beds stacked in haphazard piles. The air smelled of mildew and iron. Shadows clung to the walls, twisting in the beam of her flashlight. The hum grew louder, resonating through the concrete floor. Then Clara saw movement, a figure in a sailor's uniform, pale and wet, standing at the far end of the hallway. Its head tilted unnaturally, staring straight at her. The uniform looked as if it had been underwater for decades, and its eyes, or what should have been eyes, were nothing but empty sockets reflecting her light. She froze. The figure raised one hand, pointing toward the far wall. On it, she saw scrawled writing. They never left the fog. The words pulsed as if alive, black ink stretching across the bricks. And then the figure was gone, vanished in a blink. Clara's flashlight flickered and died. The hum became a whisper, repeating her name over and over. Clara, Clara. She turned to leave, but the stairwell had vanished. In its place, a wall of darkness, moving, breathing, as if the hospital itself were alive. Panic set in. Hours passed, though time felt distorted. The fog from the harbor crept through broken windows, curling around her legs like cold fingers. Clara stumbled through the hallways, recording everything she could, desperate to escape. Doors led to rooms that weren't there before. Beds appeared where there had been empty floors. The ceilings groaned as if something heavy moved above. At last, she found herself in the observation room, a high-ceilinged chamber overlooking the harbor. The window was cracked, the fog pressing against it like water, and in the distance she saw ships, or ghostly shapes of ships, moving silently, their sails tattered and dripping. Figures walked the decks, but when she blinked, they were gone. And then she heard the laughter. Children, sailors, patients, echoing together. The sound was joyful, mournful, and terrifying all at once. It came closer, filling the room. Clara felt herself lifted, almost weightless, as though the fog itself carried her toward the window. She screamed, and everything went black. When the police arrived the next morning, Clara's camera was found on the dock. The footage showed her walking into the hospital, then wandering the hallways, the fog creeping closer with every frame. Then the tape went dark, nothing more. Locals say that Ashburn Harbor hasn't been the same since. On foggy nights, voices carry over the water, whispering names of sailors, patients, and strangers alike. Lights flicker in the abandoned hospital. And sometimes, if you walk along the dock, you might see a lone figure staring back, pale, wet, and impossibly still, pointing toward the darkness. And as the fog rolls in, swallowing the harbor and the town, you realize one thing: Ashburn never forgets, and it waits for the next soul curious enough to return. Third city, named Grimsport, Oregon, sits where the river meets the fog. Its warehouses lined the banks like silent sentinels, abandoned long before the modern world took notice. The air carries the smell of rust, salt, and decay. Locals avoid the district after dusk, and anyone who ventures too close to the old cannery whispers of vanished friends. Footsteps echoing where none should exist, and machinery that groans though it hasn't run in decades. The Grimsport Cannery was built in 1892, feeding the booming fishing industry of the Pacific Northwest. It once hummed with life, the clang of metal, the chatter of workers, the hiss of steam. But when the industry declined, it was left, two rot doors sealed, machines still standing, shadows growing longer each year. Yet, the stories never died. The first to arrive that night was Lucas Brandt, an urban explorer and videographer, chasing the story of the vanishing shift, a mysterious event in 1976 when an entire night crew reportedly disappeared without trace. Lucas had studied reports, old photographs, and local legends. Now, standing at the edge of the dock, he stared up at the looming cannery, its windows shattered, its water dripping from the rusted beams. He crossed the creaking bridge over the river, flashlight in hand. The metal groaned beneath his weight, echoing through the fog like a warning. He whispered into his recorder, "Lucas Brandt, documenting Grimsport Cannery, midnight, November 20th. Reports of disappearances and paranormal activity abound. Proceeding with caution." The door to the main factory hall resisted at first, then gave way with a deafening groan. Inside, shadows stretched long across the tiled floor, broken crates, and rusted machinery. The silence was complete, too complete. Lucas explored the vast hall, filming as he moved. The machines, conveyors, presses, and pulleys were frozen in time, yet he could swear some moved when not observed. The shadows shifted at the edges of his flashlight. He entered the packing wing, where workers once prepared fish for shipment. Old labels littered the floor, some from the 1920s, some more recent. But then he noticed something impossible. Footprints in the dust, wet, as if someone had walked through water, leading toward a narrow hallway no one uses. He followed them. As he stepped through the corridor, the air grew damp, heavy with the smell of brine and decay. A distant clang echoed through the building, metal hitting metal, rhythmic like a heartbeat. Then a whisper, "Don't leave us." The voice was faint, carried on a cold draft, but unmistakable. Lucas froze. His camera captured movement behind the glass panes, figures standing still, almost translucent, faces pale and twisted. Lucas reached the sub-basement, where the 1976 incident had reportedly occurred. Old lockers lined the walls, and papers fluttered in an unseen wind. As he stepped further, he noticed a faint glow emanating from a room at the end of the hall, the old control room. Inside, the glow revealed shadows of workers performing their tasks, pressing cans, sealing boxes, yet they were translucent, frozen mid-motion. One worker looked directly at him, mouth moving. No sound came. The camera caught a chilling detail, a small, yellowed note pinned to the wall. In neat handwriting, it read, "We work forever." The cannery keeps us. Don't join us. Suddenly, machinery whirred to life, though no electricity had flowed for decades. Conveyors rattled, presses groaned, and the shadows surged, surrounding Lucas. Panic overtook him. He ran, stumbling through corridors that twisted unnaturally. Doors appearing where none should exist, stairs leading to nowhere. Outside, the fog had thickened, curling around him like cold fingers. When he glanced back at the cannery, he saw shapes moving behind the broken windows, hundreds of them, watching, waiting. Lucas never returned to the cannery. His camera was found days later on the riverbank. Footage corrupted and interspersed with strange static whispers and cries layered beneath, the sound of water dripping and metal grinding. Locals say the cannery has claimed more souls since then, and if you walk the docks on a foggy night, you might hear the hum of long-dead machinery, the shuffle of unseen feet, and whispers calling your name. Grimsport doesn't forgive curiosity. It doesn't forget, and it waits, just like Ashburn and Raven Hollow, for the next story to unfold. Asterisk, asterisk, and as the fog rolls over, Grimsport, and the shadows retreat into their corners. Remember this, the stories don't end when the screen goes dark. They linger, waiting for those who dare to return. For those who are curious enough to follow the shadows, where the next tale is already beginning.